This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Well, how do you overcome temptation in your life? I'm going to give you 4 things. This is called the DASO method. D-A-S-O. And I want you to write these 4 letters down, and I want you to learn this little very simple procedure for dealing with temptation in your life. D-A-S-O. DASO. The first letter is the word D, or the first letter is D, and it's for the word define it. Define what the temptation is. You know, I'm surprised at the number of times that we don't really even know what it is that we're dealing with in our life. It's this idea that you know, I want to go do that, but why is it that you really want to go do it? What is the real temptation there? You know, what is it that's really motivating you, that's really driving you to go want to do that? Define it. I'm surprised at the number of times that I've talked to people and they don't really know what it is that they're not really facing up to the sin in their life that they're wanting to commit. They think that they're wanting this, when in fact what they're doing is there's something completely different, and they haven't really analyzed it. They haven't really defined it. Define what the temptation is. Define what it is that you really do want in your life. What it is that you're really going after. What it is that's compelling you to step out of God's will. Define it. The second thing is acknowledge it. Be honest enough. You know, we're such, and I don't know why it is, but we think that we can handle it. You know, so like I'm right here on the edge, and you know, oh, I can handle it. It's not going to be a problem. I know, I think about it, but you know, it's not going to be a problem. Oh, yes, it is, because you're already on the edge. You're already thinking about it. If it wasn't a problem, you wouldn't be dealing with it. So acknowledge that you have this weakness in your life. What do you think? God doesn't know? Who are you trying to convince? You know, I have control over this problem in my life? No, you don't. If it's a problem in your life, you don't have control over it. It's a problem in your life. So acknowledge it, for crying out loud. Own up to it. That you have this issue in your life, and you have to acknowledge it to the Lord. Does that mean you have to acknowledge it to everybody? No. Sin should be, the confession of sin should only be as public as the sin itself. That's really important to understand. Confession of sin should only be as public as the sin itself. And we've got this idea in our head that if we go and confess something to everybody, that there's some sort of catharsis that we're okay. You know, we confess it to everybody. You know, and so I come up to Jerry and I go, Jerry, I want you to know I've always hated you. And Jerry's like, what? You know, Jerry thought I loved him this whole time, you know. And all of a sudden, I've said something. Well, what have I done? I've really hurt Jerry. You know, so here I was dealing with a sin of some sort of hatred or something in my life that Jerry didn't know anything about. And so now I've confessed my sin to him, and Jerry's like, what? You just stabbed me in the back. You know, confession should only be as public as the sin itself. And so it's important for us to understand that when we are dealing with those issues in our lives, we have to acknowledge what it is what the real problem is, and whom we should acknowledge it to. Now, obviously, you need to acknowledge it to God. And if it is an issue that some other friends or brothers or sisters know about, share it with them so that they can pray with you about it and encourage you and hold you up. But it doesn't need to be one of those things where you come before the whole church and just tell them, what's messing with your head. Because all you're doing is just confusing a bunch of people who thought you were such a saint. But you do have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge it to God above everybody. D-A-S. The third one is submit it. In other words, just give it to God. God, this is a problem, this is a burden, this is a weight in my life that I'm really struggling with, and I'm just going to have to give it to you. I used to use the word swap out instead of submit, because it really is kind of the same principle. Lord, I'm swapping out my weakness for your strength. You know, I'm swapping out my sin for your forgiveness. I'm swapping out my hurt for your healing. It's the idea that I'm giving it up. You know, I've been trying to struggle with not stepping off of the island, but God, I'm weak, and so I'm submitting this to you. I'm giving it to you. You take control. You take control of where I am in this matter, God. And that brings us to the final step, the O, DASO. And that is overwhelm it. Overwhelm it. Overwhelmment is this idea that you begin to overcome the temptation itself by overwhelming it with your focus on God. You overwhelm it because you take your eye off of the weakness and you put it on the strength. The strength, of course, is God Himself. And so while I'm dealing with this weakness of whatever, of buying shoes, that's got to be a sin, you know. I mean, who needs more than 3 pairs of shoes in their lives? I've never figured this out. What do you, of all people, a man raises his hand back here. I knew a woman would, you know, and when we went to Honduras on the mission trip, Stephanie, who, by the way, this is their wedding anniversary, so they decided to take a little trip and celebrate their 1-year anniversary. Stephanie was down there. She had to go in every shoe store in Honduras. You know, and you can buy shoes here for $5. Well, that's all they're worth. They're shoes. So we had to go buy shoes. You know, it's like, oh, do what? I don't think so. You know, I think flip. Oh well, Marcia doesn't own a pair of shoes anymore. They're all flip flops. You know, she sounds like a dead fish walking. You know, it's awful. And so, well, that's going to get back to her too. By the way, one of you called her over the last week and told her about my angels thing, talking about her angels. I don't know who it was, but it was you, and you're admitting it? Thank you very much. Yeah, that angel. Oh, and by the way, I did make a mistake. That angel over the bed doesn't have stick legs. It has the legs, but they're both turning that way. It's a crippled angel. Both feet are turning to the left or something. It's like really odd. But all right. So anyway, so I have this temptation to go out and buy shoes because that's God's. And if I give it over to the Lord, what I'm saying, when I overwhelm it, what I'm doing is I'm taking my eyes off of the weakness and putting them on the Lord. Lord, what is it that you want? What do you want to accomplish in my life? What is it that you desire for my life? God, my focus begins to move away from that sin that is off of God's island, and I begin turning around and looking back towards the throne. And I'm looking back towards what it is that God wants. And my focus is on Him, not on the weakness in my life. That's how you deal with temptation in your life. And that's how God will not abandon you during that time. So when it says, lead us not to temptation, another way of looking at it is, lead us back to the throne. Bring me back to the throne, God. Get my eyes off of the weakness. Get my eyes off of the temptation in my life. And cause me to come back to the throne.